We're going to start our drafting for this course by practicing and learning how to do the two-piece sleeve. The two-piece sleeve is a classic for a tailored jacket in that it gives the designer the opportunity to really shape the sleeve according to people's body type. We're going to be working at half scale, and then when it comes time for you to draft your pieces, you'll have some practice and you'll understand the theory. So you're going to start off with the sloper that I sent to everyone, and you're going to trace it onto a piece of paper and cut it out. Make sure that you have put in all of the markings from the sloper you were given. So mark where your bicep is. You can actually add even the back and the front, and of course your elbow, the center grain line, and your notches, which are very important. I've drafted here in red, so hopefully you can see this a little better on film. Okay, so let's get started. The first step is that we're going to fold the sleeve cap on the bicep line, touching at the center guideline. So what you're going to do is to take your pattern and fold it, and you're going to crease it straight down. That's the back. I'm going to go ahead and do it. They're meeting right at that center line, and I'm going to crease all the way down. So it should look like this. The next step is to draw the curve of the front and the back undersleeve. So I'm going to take, and I'm doing this one in a blue, and I'm going to trace the curve of my underline right onto my plot. So this is what I'm doing now. I always refer to as a plot. Once I have that traced, you can open it up, take a look at what it looks like. You can true it up if it didn't exactly get to exactly where you want it. You can always stop to true it up. So you have now marked the beginning of what will become eventually the underarm. The next step is to mark dots 1 1/4 inches from the grain line, and then we're going to square up to the curve of the sleeve. So again, we're working in half scale, so I know that half of 1 1/4 inches is 5/8. So I'm going to mark the dot here to the back of the sleeve, and then I'm going to come over on the front of the sleeve and put a line. Then I'm going to square up, use my see-through for this, to square up and give myself a line. So I'm lining up my ruler with my elbow and my bicep line, because I know those have been trued out straight, and I'm going to draw a line on both. Next, I'm going to mark this point right here with an X, and again, I'm using bigger pencils and pens because I really want you to see it. So the points here are going to be called point X. Okay, and that's the fold line where we fold it in. I'm now going to make markings for my panels. So where I drew up from the bicep line, I'm going to mark that point Z again on both sides, and I'm going to take my ruler and directly across from there, again from that point, I'm going to mark again, and I'm going to call this point Y. Going to do it on the same on the other side. So again, looking carefully where I came up, straight across from that will be point Y. Okay, so I have my 4 points here. Okay. The next thing that I want to do is to take the wrist measurement here and divide it by 4. So you want to take your tape measure, flatten out your pattern, and walk your tape measure around your curve until you get your measurement. So I have 4 1/4. I'm now going to divide that by 4, and again you have to remember you're working at half scale. So when you go to do this on your full sleeve, the measurement's going to be bigger. So just remember that. So 4 1/4 divided by 4 gives me 1 1/16 of an inch. So I'm going to measure over 1, 2, 3, and 4. Exact. Okay. I'm going to mark the marks on the outside with an X. So that's another point X. I'm now going to take my elbow line and divide it each section from the center out in half. So I'm going to measure here. I get 2 3/4. Half of that is 1 3/8. So I'm going to mark here. This is also going to be called X. And again, on the front side, same thing. I'm getting 2 3/4. So I have 1 3/8 on this side, and that's going to be called X. Now I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to draw and connect all of my X lines. So I'm going to start at the top, connecting the cap to the elbow, and then connecting the elbow to the wrist, and then I'll do it on the front as well, connecting the top cap to the elbow, and then the elbow to the wrist. And you can already start to see, if you look inside my blue lines here, that there's this gentle curve that happens, and that's really where you get to shape the sleeve quite a bit when you're done with your drafting. Next, we're going to draft for the upper sleeve, which will be where the Y points are. So you're going to start by measuring from X to Y at the elbow level coming out. From X to Y at the elbow level, it calls for 1 inch, and again we're doing half scale, so we want half the measurement, so it'll be 1/2 inch. This becomes my new Y, and at the wrist we want to go out at full scale 3/4 of an inch, so at 1/2 inch it's going to be 3/8. Going to do the same thing on the front of the sleeve. The elbow at full scale comes out 1 inch, but at half scale we're going to go out 1/2 inch. That's going to give you Y. At the wrist is 3/4 of an inch at full scale, so at half scale it will be 3/8 of an inch. And there's my Y. Now we're going to draw connecting lines. I'm going to actually go back to my red pencil now and connect all my Y dots. So I'm going again from the underarm, really at this point, it becomes more of the underarm than the cap, to the elbow, from the elbow to the wrist. I'm going to go right over that dart because that dart's going to get eased in. Okay. On the front side, the same thing. I'm taking point Y and connecting it to the elbow, from the underarm to the elbow, and then from the elbow to the wrist. Now for the undersleeve. You're basically going to do the same thing, except this time you're going to come inside the pattern, in from X. So at X, you're going to measure over the same measurement as you did to go out, so it's the same distance. So you came out from X to Y. Now you're going to go in to make Z. So again, at the elbow, it's 1 inch at full scale, and it's 1/2 inch at half scale. So this will be Z on both sides. And at the wrist, the same thing, 3/4 of an inch. So we're going to divide that in half because we're working half scale. We're having 3/8 of an inch in towards your center. And another 3/8 of an inch in from on the front side. Now what you're going to do is to draw connecting lines for Z. So now I've switched pencils, so this is purple. So I'm connecting, again, my underarm to my elbow, and my elbow to my wrist. And same thing on the other side. Underarm to elbow, and elbow to wrist. Next step is to mark the notches. So your notches are going to be, again, at full scale, 1.5 inches up on your Y and Z lines, so that we want to make sure that notches are on just the back. That way you can tell the back from the front, because these pieces can get confused pretty easily. So again, it's asking for 1.5 inches, so we'll do 3/4, and I will put a notch above the elbow line, and I'll put another notch below the elbow line. And the same thing with the underarm. Up from Z, I'm going 3/4 inches at half scale. 3/4 inches, and there you go. You have all your notches ready, so you can match those pieces up when you're sewing, and also it helps to indicate the front from the back. The next thing we're going to do is to trace the undersleeve onto its own piece of paper. So what I'm going to do in my demonstration is to use a light board. So instead of sticking the paper under, I'm going to stick the paper on top. It really doesn't matter. If I'm going to stick it on top, I need to flip this over, okay? Then what I'm going to do is put a piece of paper on top, and I'm going to very carefully trace my underarm pattern. So I have my curve here. Switch over to my, and I'm putting this in kind of lightly because I'm going to shape it when I'm done. I'm following my wrist, and then from wrist to elbow, here. One thing I forgot that's one of the most important things is always the notches for 100 different reasons. So now I have my undersleeve, and I want to take it and shape it a little bit. So I'm going to use my French curve in this case. I can see this came out as a pretty straight line, and I do want some shape in that. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit off on the inside. Not enough that it's going to make too much of a difference, but I do want this nice little curve to happen. In the underarm. That's probably a little too much. I'm usually better off. If I've taken off this much here, I probably want to put a tiny bit more on over here. And again, what I'm looking for is to have this nice arch. It's very subtle, and actually this might work out fine because I have here, yeah, this is going to work out fine. And again, you want to keep blending. Oops, keep blending until it's right. So now I have a nice little curve here. So what I'm going to do next is to go ahead and cut out everything except the hem. So I can see now I've got this nice soft curve that I'm looking for in the underarm piece. And now what I need to do is I need to walk it to the seam it will be sewn to make sure they're the exact same length and that my notches are matching up. So I'm going to bring in my original plot, and I'm going to walk the sleeve to the Y curve. So this is again, and this when, before we cut this out, we're going to do some shaping here too. Let's walk it first. So I'm walking to my notch, I'm rotating, making sure my notches are matching up exactly. And I can see here that that is where my sleeve will end. And now flip the piece over and walk it to the other side. And I can see here, this is too long. So I've lost some of the curve, which is okay. I'm going to transfer this information over. And give myself a nice soft curve here. And now my pattern is trued and ready to go. Again, on your upper sleeve. We can do some softening here. I'm actually kind of happy with these shapes. Just soften this up a little bit. And softening usually in the elbow a little bit, and it shouldn't, you don't want to go too much on this one. The other one can take the curve more so. Okay, that actually looks pretty good. And then what you can do is to cut off at the Y line, to cut off what really becomes your undersleeve. One more walk, make sure my patterns are exact. Oops, sit down. Notch is matching up exactly. Okay, good. Perfect. And there you go. Then of course I want to make sure that I mark these as my upper sleeve. And my undersleeve. You're good to go. That's your two-piece sleeve. The sleeve that we just practiced is considered the basic two-piece sleeve designed for a basic jacket body with a traditional side seam. The undersleeve measurements can be varied and shift to accommodate the panel and wrap style lines of any jacket or coat. In the example that I've given you here from the textbook, this is the wraparound style, and this is where the side seam shifts to the back panel. So now what you would want to do is to line up the back of your sleeve, your undersleeve, with the point that matches up to the back panel. The front of the undersleeve can really fall anywhere where you feel is attractive for the sleeve style. In this next example, we have a 3-panel jacket. Here is where you actually open up the side seam to insert a panel into the jacket to give it really lots of capability of shaping. With this jacket, the undersleeve would then be shaped to the size of the panel so that it all lined up nicely and matched. So these are some variations that you may come into when you're designing your jacket and creating a two-piece sleeve.